It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind that already felt special before anything even happened. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen blinds, and I could smell the faint aroma of coffee brewing, my favorite ritual. It was Mother's Day, and although I never expected grand gestures, I always cherished the little moments. As I sat down at the kitchen table, my daughter, Emma, came running in, clutching something behind her back. She was smiling in that mischievous way only an 8-year-old can, half excitement, half secret. "Close your eyes, Mom," she said, bouncing on her toes. I laughed and played along. "All right, they're closed. Okay, now open." When I opened my eyes, she was holding out a small, handmade card. It was slightly crooked, the edges a little bent, but I could tell she'd worked hard on it. There were pink crayon hearts all over the front, and in big, uneven letters it said, "Happy Mother's Day, Mommy." My heart melted instantly. I reached out and took it from her tiny hands, smiling. "Oh, sweetheart, this is beautiful. Read it, Mommy," she said eagerly, her eyes wide with anticipation. So, I opened the card. Inside, there were a few sentences written in her careful handwriting, the kind where every letter was pressed too hard into the paper. At first, it was sweet and simple, exactly what you'd expect from a child's Mother's Day note. But as I reached the last line, my smile slowly faded. My eyes froze on the words. My chest tightened. It said something no 8-year-old should have known, something that made my hands tremble. I looked up at Emma, and she just stood there, watching me, her expression unreadable. And that was the moment everything changed. I stared at the card, my pulse quickening with every second that passed. The last line, written in those innocent crayon letters, said, "Greater than, don't forget what happened in the basement, Mommy. He said he's coming back soon." My first instinct was to laugh it off. Kids say strange things all the time, right? Maybe she saw something in a movie, or she was just playing. But then I remembered, we didn't have a basement. Not anymore. When we bought this house 3 years ago, the basement had been sealed off. The real estate agent told us it was due to old plumbing issues, and honestly, I never questioned it. The door that used to lead down there was plastered over and painted to match the wall. So how could Emma even know about it? "Sweetheart," I said carefully, trying to sound calm, "where did you hear about the basement?" She tilted her head and gave me a puzzled look, like she couldn't understand why I was asking. "From the man," she said. My stomach dropped. "What man?" "The one who talks to me at night," she replied simply. "He told me to write that so you'd remember." I felt my breath catch. For a split second, I thought maybe she was making it up. Imaginary friends were normal for kids her age. But there was something about the way she said it, so matter of fact, so calm, that made the air in the room feel colder. "The man talks to you?" I asked again, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. "Uh-huh. He says he used to live here." In the dark, I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding in my chest as I glanced back at the card, those crayon words staring up at me like a warning. That was when I noticed something else. At the bottom corner of the card, in tiny, shaky writing that definitely wasn't Emma's, were 2 faint words in pencil. "Greater than, help me." And I swear, I felt the room go silent. For the rest of that morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Emma went off to play in the living room, humming softly to herself, while I sat at the kitchen table, staring at that handmade card like it was a ticking bomb. I kept reading those words over and over. "Greater than, he said he's coming back soon. Help me." The handwriting in pencil looked too neat, too deliberate, like someone had tried to write carefully, even while trembling. It wasn't Emma's. I knew her writing as well as I knew my own heartbeat. By the afternoon, curiosity had turned into dread. I decided I needed to see that basement for myself, even if it meant facing whatever secrets this old house was hiding. Our house was built in the 1950s, full of narrow hallways and strange corners. The place where the basement door used to be was in the hallway between the kitchen and laundry room, now covered by a wall painted the same soft gray as the rest of the house. But something strange had always bothered me about that wall. It sounded hollow when you tapped on it. I'd brushed it off as old construction, until now. So, I grabbed a flashlight, moved the laundry basket out of the way, and pressed my hand against the wall. The paint was smooth, but under the surface, I could feel a faint seam, a rectangular outline that shouldn't have been there. My heart started racing. I went to the garage, grabbed a small hammer, and tapped the edge of the wall. Thud, thud, hollow. I hit again, harder. This time, a thin crack appeared, revealing something dark beneath. I chipped away more of the plaster until my hammer struck metal. A doorknob, old and rusted, hidden beneath a thin layer of drywall. For a long moment, I just stood there, frozen. The logical part of me screamed to stop, to call someone, to leave it alone, but another part of me, the part that couldn't stop thinking about that message, kept pushing forward. I brushed away the debris and grabbed the handle. It felt ice cold. I turned it slowly. The door creaked open just an inch, releasing a gust of air that smelled like damp earth and something faintly metallic. That's when I heard it, a whisper from the darkness below. Soft, drawn out, and impossible to mistake. It said, "You remembered." For a full minute, I couldn't move. The whisper had been so clear, so close, it felt like it had brushed against my ear. But when I shone the flashlight toward the opening, nothing was there, just a steep set of stairs disappearing into pitch-black darkness. My mind raced through every possible explanation. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe the house's old ventilation system had made a sound that seemed like a whisper. But deep down, I knew what I'd heard. Still, I had to see. I couldn't ignore it now, not after what Emma wrote. I took a deep breath, pushed the door open wider, and stepped onto the first creaking stair. The air down there was heavy, thick with dust and that same metallic smell, like old iron or dried blood. My flashlight flickered for a moment, and I silently cursed myself for not checking the batteries. Step by step, I descended, my hand brushing the rough, cold wall for balance. About halfway down, I started noticing things, scratches along the wall, small and uneven, as if someone had been clawing their way up. I leaned closer and saw letters, carved faintly into the concrete. Greater than, let me out. The words looked old, the edges of the letters darkened with grime. I swallowed hard and kept going until I reached the bottom. The basement was larger than I expected, an open, rectangular space with low ceilings and concrete floors. In one corner, there was an old workbench covered in tools, most of them rusted. And beside it, something that made my stomach twist, a small wooden chair, toppled over, with ropes still tied to its arms. That was when I noticed the drawings on the wall. Crayon drawings, pink, blue, and green, just like the ones Emma used upstairs. There were stick figures, hearts, and what looked like a family. A mom, a dad, a little girl. But in the corner of one drawing, there was another figure, a tall, faceless man, drawn entirely in black crayon, with long arms reaching toward the little girl. My flashlight trembled in my hand. I heard something behind me, a faint tap tap tap, like footsteps or fingers brushing against the wall. I swung the light around, but no one was there. Just darkness. And then I noticed something on the floor near the far wall, a small piece of paper, folded neatly in half. I picked it up, my fingers shaking. It was another card. Same kind of paper, same crayon handwriting. It read, "Greater than, thank you for finding me, Mommy. Now he can see you too." Before I could process it, the door at the top of the stairs slammed shut. And from somewhere behind me, a man's voice whispered again, this time, closer. The sound of that voice froze me where I stood. It was deep, dry, and low, like someone speaking through a cracked throat. My flashlight beam trembled across the damp concrete walls as I spun around, searching for any sign of movement. "Who's there?" I managed to say, though my voice broke halfway through. Silence. Then, faintly, from the far corner of the basement, came the slow drag of footsteps. Heavy ones. I backed up, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I aimed the light toward the corner, but the beam flickered again, weak and dying. Just before it dimmed completely, I caught a glimpse of something, two pale shapes that looked like bare feet, standing just beyond the edge of the light. "Emma!" I shouted instinctively, my voice echoing against the concrete. But no answer came. The footsteps stopped. Then, after a pause, a whisper came again, soft but clear. "Greater than, you shouldn't have opened the door." The flashlight finally went out. I was swallowed in darkness. Panic surged through me. I scrambled backward, fumbling for the stairs, but my foot hit something hard, metal. My fingers brushed against the edge of that small wooden chair. It wasn't where I had seen it before. It had moved. I felt the air shift behind me, the faint sound of breathing that wasn't mine. Close, Too close. I bolted. My hands found the stairs, and I climbed, tripping halfway up. I slammed my fists against the door at the top, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. Somehow, from the outside. Emma. I screamed again, pounding until my knuckles stung. Emma, open the door. From the other side, I finally heard movement, small footsteps, light and quick. Relief flooded through me for half a second, until I heard her voice. Mommy, she said softly through the door. Yes, baby. Open it, please. There was a pause. Then, in that same calm, detached tone she'd used earlier, she said. Greater than, he said you belong down there now. My blood ran cold. Before I could respond, I heard the sound of the latch sliding back into place, locking the door tighter. Then silence again. Down below, in the darkness behind me, something began to hum, a low, rhythmic sound, almost like someone quietly singing. And then, a man's whisper echoed through the basement once more. I pressed my back against the cold wooden door, too afraid to move, too terrified to breathe. The humming below had turned into something almost like a lullaby, soft, familiar, and horribly wrong. It was my voice. Someone, something, was mimicking the way I used to sing to Emma before bed. Every note matched perfectly. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the flashlight when it flickered back to life for a moment. I aimed it toward the sound. The basement looked empty again, but the shadows felt thicker, heavier, as if they were watching me. My mind screamed for logic. This had to be some kind of trick, maybe a cruel prank, maybe. But then I saw it. On the far wall, beneath the crayon drawings, part of the concrete looked newer than the rest, lighter, smoother. Like someone had patched it recently. My instincts told me to stay away, but my curiosity, my desperate need to understand, dragged me toward it. I found a rusted crowbar on the workbench and began prying at the edge. The cement cracked easily, almost too easily, releasing that same metallic, rotten smell I'd noticed before. When the last piece broke away, something soft and white peeked through the gap. Fabric. I pulled harder. The flashlight beam trembled as I peeled the fabric away, and then I saw what it was. A human hand. Dry, grayish, bones visible beneath the skin. I stumbled back, gagging, the flashlight dropping to the floor. It rolled, casting wild beams of light across the wall, and that's when I noticed something else scrawled behind the crayon drawings, faint but unmistakable. Words scratched deep into the concrete, in adult handwriting this time. Greater than, she isn't mine. Don't let her out. I froze. The humming stopped. And then a small voice came from the top of the stairs, Emma's voice. But it wasn't sweet or playful this time. It was flat, echoing slightly, like two people speaking at once. Greater than, Mommy, he says you shouldn't have remembered. I looked up, my heart hammering, and saw her tiny silhouette standing in the doorway, dim light outlining her shape. Her head tilted to the side. Emma, I whispered. She smiled, but it wasn't her smile. It was his. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The beam of my flashlight trembled against the wall, bouncing shadows across Emma's small frame. She stood perfectly still at the top of the stairs, head tilted in that unnatural, jerky way that made my skin crawl. Her voice came again, two tones at once, hers and something deeper, distorted, layered beneath. Greater than, you opened his door, Mommy. You brought him back. I swallowed hard, backing away from the wall. The bones behind me seemed to press against my thoughts, whispering for me to run. But I couldn't, not while my daughter was standing there like that. Emma, I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady, come here, sweetheart. Let's go upstairs, okay? She blinked slowly, and for just a heartbeat, I saw confusion flicker in her eyes. The real Emma was still in there somewhere. Then she said, he lived here first. Before us. He told me his name. My mouth went dry. What's his name, baby? She smiled again, but her voice wasn't hers anymore when she answered. It came from deep in her chest, gravelly and ancient. Greater than, Henry Keller. That name hit me like a punch. I'd seen it before, on an old newspaper clipping I found when we first moved in, tucked behind a drawer. Local man missing after suspected basement accident, 1962. Home sealed off. The article had mentioned the same address. Our address. My mind reeled as everything began to connect. The sealed basement, the patched wall, the strange noises in the night that I'd blamed on old pipes. Emma, I whispered, you need to fight him, do you understand? He's not your friend. He's not. But before I could finish, her little hands gripped the stair rail, knuckles whitening. Her head twitched slightly, and the deep voice answered for her. Greater than, she doesn't need to fight me. She's my family now. You took her place. The light flickered again, and I saw movement behind Emma, something tall, thin, and wrong, standing just out of reach. It bent forward, its outline rippling like smoke, its face nothing but a blur of pale skin and empty hollows where eyes should be. Stop, I whispered, backing away. Please, stop. The voice that came back was a whisper and a growl all at once. Greater than, you brought me back. Now you'll stay where I was left. And with that, Emma turned her head completely toward the dark figure, without moving her body at all. The last thing I saw before the light went out again was the thing placing its hand gently on her shoulder. And she smiled, whispering, Greater than, good night, Mommy. The basement fell into absolute blackness. I could hear nothing but my own ragged breathing, and that faint hum again, circling me like it had a pulse. I fumbled on the floor, desperate to find the flashlight. When I finally did, I hit it hard against my palm until it flickered back to life. Emma was gone. The door at the top of the stairs stood wide open now, creaking gently as though someone had just slipped through. For a long moment, I couldn't move. Every instinct screamed to run upstairs and grab her, but something in that darkness below kept pulling at me. Henry Keller. The name echoed in my head like a warning. I turned the flashlight toward the wall again, at the patch of crumbling cement where I had uncovered the remains. My shaking hands brushed away more debris, revealing the outline of a body curled tight beneath the floor. The bones were old, half turned to dust, but around the neck was something that didn't belong there. A rusted metal chain. I leaned closer and saw it led upward into the ceiling beam, as though whoever had died here had been chained in place. I felt bile rise in my throat. On the ground beside the skeleton was a small tin box, half buried in dirt. I hesitated, then pried it open. Inside were old photographs, faded, water-stained. One showed a man with dark hair, serious eyes, standing beside a little girl who looked almost exactly like Emma. My hands trembled as I flipped the photo over. Written in shaky cursive were the words, Greater than, me and my daughter, Anna, 1961. But the next photo stopped my heart. It was the same little girl, but her eyes were blacked out with crayon. And scrawled across the front, in the same thick black wax, were the words, Greater than, she took her place. I didn't understand, until I looked again at the wall of drawings behind me. The ones that I'd thought were Emma's. Only now, in the flashlight's weak glow, I could see layers beneath them, older crayon marks, faded and smeared, as if another child had drawn there long before us. Anna's drawings. Suddenly, footsteps echoed above me, quick, uneven, like someone running across the living room floor. I looked up at the ceiling, my breath catching. Then Emma's voice came from directly above me, muffled but clear. Greater than, Mommy, he wants to show you what you did. The ceiling above me creaked. Dust rained down, and through one of the cracks, I saw the outline of 2 feet, Emma's, standing completely still. But beside her, another pair appeared. Larger, bare, motionless, and the chain around the skeleton's neck gave one last, metallic clink. I stared up at the ceiling, my breath catching in my throat. Emma's small feet were inches apart from those larger, pale ones that hadn't moved once. The air around me felt thick, charged, like the whole house was holding its breath. Then, a sound began to rise, a low groan of wood and metal, like the house itself was waking up. The chain that hung from the beam rattled softly. My flashlight dimmed again, flickering like it was being choked by the darkness itself. Emma, I shouted, my voice breaking. Get away from him. No response. I ran for the stairs, but the steps seemed to stretch longer than before, each one sinking slightly beneath my feet, as though the house didn't want me to leave. I climbed anyway, my legs shaking, my lungs burning. When I finally reached the top, I pushed through the door and stumbled into the kitchen. Everything looked wrong. The light had a yellow tint, the walls seemed older, warped, like I'd stepped back in time. Emma stood in the middle of the room, her back to me. Her head tilted again, slow and mechanical. Sweetheart, I whispered, my voice trembling. She turned around. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy and distant. He says you took what was his, she said softly. Behind her, I saw movement, a faint, shimmering figure taking shape. A tall man, his outline trembling like smoke. His face was hollow, his features sunken, but his eyes, they were full of rage. "You locked me away," he rasped, voice echoing through the air. "You took her, and left me to rot." I shook my head, backing up. I don't know who you are." The figure moved closer, his shadow spilling across the floor. "Not you," he whispered, pointing a trembling hand toward Emma. "Her." I froze. "What do you mean?" He looked straight at me now, and for the first time, I could see his face clearly, the same one from the photograph in the tin box. "Henry Keller. She came back," he said, voice shaking with grief and fury. "My little girl. You brought her back when you moved in." I turned to Emma, my daughter, and felt my blood run cold. Her lips were trembling. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice wasn't hers anymore. "Greater than, I'm sorry, Daddy." The air went still. Henry's shadow stopped moving. His voice cracked when he spoke again, softer now. "You remember me, don't you?" Anna, nodded slowly. "You said you'd come back for me." My knees buckled. I couldn't breathe. I didn't understand. My daughter, my Emma, wasn't Emma at all. Henry extended his hand toward her. "It's time to go home," he whispered. She stepped forward. I screamed, "No, she's my daughter," and grabbed her hand. But in that instant, the room went completely black. Something cold tore through me like a wind, and I felt a whisper right next to my ear. "Greater than, then trade places." Everything went dark. Not the kind of darkness you get when lights go out, but a deeper, swallowing black that felt alive. I couldn't see Emma. I couldn't even feel her hand anymore. Only cold. A cold so sharp it burned. Then I heard it. Her voice. My daughter's voice, echoing faintly, calling out to me from somewhere far away. "Mommy." I spun around. "Emma. Baby, where are you?" "Mommy, it's cold," she whispered, her voice breaking. I followed the sound, but the more I moved, the smaller it became, as if she were being pulled farther and farther from me. My heart pounded, panic rising in my throat. Then the light returned, just a flicker at first, enough to see I was no longer in the kitchen. I was back in the basement. The air was thick with dust, the walls cracked and dripping with moisture. But it was different now. The skeleton was gone. The chain hung empty. At the far end of the basement, a faint light glowed, a lantern, swaying gently from a nail in the wall. Beneath it stood Henry Keller. He looked almost human now. His features were clearer, though pale and hollow. His eyes fixed on me with something that wasn't anger anymore. Something like sorrow. "She missed you," he said quietly. She never stopped calling. Behind him stood Emma, or what looked like her. She was holding a small, old-fashioned doll, her dress smudged with dust. Her eyes were vacant, lost. "Let her go," I whispered. "Please, take me instead." Henry's gaze lingered on me. "You already did," he said. And that's when I saw the truth. In the reflection of the lantern's glass, I saw myself, but it wasn't me. My face was pale, eyes hollow, body thin and transparent. I wasn't breathing. I turned back toward Emma, and the little girl in front of me smiled. But this time, it wasn't Emma's smile. It was mine. She stepped toward the stairs, clutching the doll, humming the same lullaby I used to sing. Henry placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and nodded once. Then he looked back at me. "She'll forget soon," he said softly. "They always do." I screamed her name, but no sound came out. My voice was gone. The basement door creaked shut, the faint light of the lantern flickered, and everything faded into black again. Epilogue. 1 year later. The new family who bought the house said it was perfect, quiet, cozy, with a recently sealed basement. On their first Mother's Day, the little girl found a handmade card sitting on the kitchen table. It was old, yellowed at the edges, written in a child's shaky handwriting. "Greater than, Happy Mother's Day, Mommy. Thank you for finding me." When her mother opened it, she frowned. At the very bottom, written faintly in pencil, were 2 words that hadn't been there before. "Greater than, help me."